It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. And we do appreciate also all those listeners out there on the RealAg Radio podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Lots of options there. Maybe more options than even all the social media platforms that are out there, which is actually really, really hard to believe. And speaking of social media platforms, we are on, I think, all of them. All of them. You can provide feedback as well. If you're not up for social media, I know it can be kind of like can get ugly. You can always just send an email. That sounds simpler. shaney@realagriculture.com, or of course there's a RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. One heck of a week. Busy. Lots of stuff happening. We've got pretty concerning stuff happening between Israel and Iran. We got an FPT meeting in Canada that has been canceled because of the wildfires. We've got the G7 summit is starting on Sunday. So there is no shortage of stuff to talk about today with the RealAg Issues Panel. Looking forward to having Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture, as well, of course, Tyler McCann, Managing Director at CAPI. So looking forward to the big discussion here today on the program. Okay, let's let's just take a break. Let's just get to the show. I'm going to make sure the panelists have a full cup of coffee and they're ready to rock, and we'll get to all the topics when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147. Time for a product spotlight with ATP Nutrition. Jared Chambers, what exactly is a biostimulant?
Enhances nutrient uptake, enhances nutrient use efficiency while dealing with abiotic stress. It is a complement to a nutrient. If a plant is missing certain nutrients, it can't always expel the oxygen out of the leaf, and it actually damages the leaf and damages the cell, which means photosynthesis is compromised. With biostimulants, it actually tells the plant to get rid of oxygen. It becomes an antioxidant. If you don't fix the nutritional imbalance, you've only temporarily fixed the problem. So this is why a biostimulant has to be tied into a tissue sample, and then to say what nutrient is out of balance. What is your targeted goal? So my treatments are going to be target this 1 or 2 nutrients with the biostimulant in it.
For audience listening in the U.S. or in Canada, where do they go?
They go to atpag.com.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch WheatPete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Let's get rocking here with the RealAg Issues Panel here on this Friday. But first, I want to tell you about The Dirt. It's an economics podcast, and it's your place for farm-smart topics to boost your profitability. Join host Mike Howell on Season 4 of The Dirt podcast, available now at nutrient-economics.com. Okay, let's bring in the panel. Up first, Lyndsey Smith, coming out of Ottawa, Ontario. Lyndsey, how are we doing?
Do you want the real answer or like the air answer? No, you know what? It's fine. It's just, it is already almost middle of June, which kind of snuck up on me. This week has been a whirlwind, and that's before we include all the newsy stuff we're going to talk about. So just personally, between farming and family and kids events and all that, I'm tired, Shaun. That's the long and the short of it. I'm sleepy. It's that kind of week. But yeah, no, we're good. And the weather has finally turned around, so I'll say this, and I apologize to everyone who, of course, wants rain. We are finally drying out a bit, and I have a whole bunch of hay to do, so that's really good news. So
yeah,
that's what I'm going with.
I feel very fresh today, mainly because I got my plane nap this week. I flew home from Toronto, and I'm a high achiever when it comes to plane naps.
We are the opposites.
Yeah, you can't sleep on a plane.
I can't sleep on a plane.
I'm quite the expert in it. But,
Yes, you are.
I won't tell you about the guy sitting beside me in the middle seat on my flight. And we also found out this week, it's the terrible flying tragedy, what happened with that Air India flight. That is awful.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah. There's
One survivor, right? Guy sitting in 11A.
It's wild. Like, absolutely wild. Anyway, but yes, there's just the news this week has just been incessant. Like, everywhere around the world, politically, and disasters, weather, like, it has not stopped.
Well, we'll try to shed as much light on it as we possibly can. Also joining us, Kelvin Heppner, coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Hey, Kelvin, how's it going?
Doing well here. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day, and I just spent a couple hours at a elementary school track and field meet. So that's
screaming.
I have not been paying attention to the news of so if any new wars have started or anything like that the last couple hours, you'll have to bring me up to speed.
Do we even do traditional track events anymore, or have we just like made it?
We do.
All
It's kind of 50-50. So this was grade 4. You're not into junior high school yet. So grade 4, they had a mix. There was like chalk drawing was one event, but they still had like a 200 and 400 and 800 meter races and long jump and high jump and ball throw. Yeah.
Ball throw. Yeah, I was
still some
competitiveness. I was pretty good at ball throw. I remember my oldest son was quite fast. He still was pretty fast, even as a senior and playing baseball in college. But he was pretty speedy in the 60 and the 80 and then the 100. And I remember he was just held like the grade 8 record or something like that at R.I. Baker in Coaldale. Big achievement there. I think the record still holds. And I remember we took him to the city track meet. And then you're like exposed to like there was like a kid that it was like I think he's actually the Flash. Like it was just like it was like wow. Hey, city track meet a little harder.
Sorry, kid, I didn't give you.
A little more competitive.
Yeah. Didn't quite get the right genetics in some of those.
No. Have you seen me run? Bad back and all. Lucky I can sit.
I don't know if I have, but I don't think I have.
No,
but
more like
but
we're going to be together.
You reach a point there where effort isn't enough. Yeah.
We'll have a sprint race when we get together in a month. Also joining us is executive director, managing director at CAPI. It is Tyler McCann, and he is here today. Tyler, how are we doing?
I'm doing really well, Shaun. I guess I got to make like a bit of a appearance last week in spirit when you guys kindly noted my absence because I was putting family first. Good thing to do every now and again, everyone. But be prepared for lots of fist shaking today, everyone. Lots of things to talk about.
You're wearing a sweater. Where are you?
I'm in Western Quebec. It's like it's fresh out today.
Really?
Yeah, it was like 8 degrees last night.
I took my hoodie off to put something on a little bit more professional to record this, but I was when I went out to the barn this morning. It was cold.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's dive in. Let's start off with the FedProv territory ag meeting as of yesterday. I'll say we broke the story. Canceled. Kelvin, why?
The main reason is the wildfire situation here in Manitoba. So this is the annual get-together of ag ministers from all the provinces, territories, and federal government. It was supposed to take place January, now I don't have the dates in front of me, 16th to 18th, I believe, in Winnipeg. And Tyler, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. I'll look it up. Yeah, 16 to 18. That week. And so Manitoba, Saskatchewan are currently both under states of emergency due to the wildfires. There are 21,000 roughly evacuees from northern Manitoba communities. Most of them are in Winnipeg, staying at hotels. And so the Premier of Manitoba and other community leaders, First Nations leaders, have been asking people, tourists especially, to avoid booking hotels for non-essential reasons. And so my understanding is the pressure likely came from the Manitoba Premier or his office that, hey, maybe we shouldn't be inviting a few hundred people from across the country to Winnipeg at this time for, there's optics around it, of course. And the federal government is always risk averse on this type of thing too. And so they made the call officially, I believe yesterday, postpone it. It's not canceled, Shaun. They're planning to hold an in-person meeting in fall, and they are also planning to meet virtually that same week in July sometime. So there will still be some meetings happening, but the first official appearance of Heath MacDonald, the new federal ag minister, to his provincial counterparts, his territorial counterparts, will be delayed by at least a couple months.
What does anybody can step in here? Why not just move it to a different place? Like, I get it. We don't want to fill up hotel rooms in Winnipeg, but like, there's lots of cities that can host this. To me, the message here is it really wasn't that important of a meeting anyway. So we'll just have it the fall.
No, I think that's the wrong message to take from this, Shaun. I really do think it's the wrong message. I mean, one, it is a relatively big thing. You can't find space to host something like this on a month's notice necessarily. It's not necessarily easy thing to do. There is also a dynamic where Manitoba is the co-host, and so Manitoba should be hosting the in-person meeting. I'm sure that plays into it a little bit, and so there's the preference to wait and move the in-person meeting to the fall. I think that there's a bit of a question that I don't know the answer to this. My hunch is that maybe they're not also fully ready to dive deep into these issues, and maybe the fall works a little bit better for internal planning, and I wonder if that played a bit into this, where
fires give them cover.
Again, I don't think you should frame it that way, and I don't think that they would want it framed that way. I think that there's kind of this reality of saying, look, Manitoba wants to make sure the hotel space is available for those that really need it. And you know what? Maybe another month or two is probably not a bad thing for governments if they want to do something meaningful with it. The big question in my mind now is, are governments actually going to do something with an extra month or two in their timing so that when they meet in the fall in person, something more impactful comes out of that meeting?
Yeah. So to add to that, I think that, first of all, I think it is a very real thing to say, realistically, Winnipeg is, there are displaced people all over the place right now with these wildfires. It's not likely to improve significantly in the next few weeks. So there is the optics of that for sure, and the logistics of it. And let's not forget that, yes, we could move it, but realistically, Alberta's dealing with wildfires, as is Saskatchewan, and our ag ministers are involved in this because we are talking about, in some areas at least anyway, there being ranchers affected and cropland as well. So, I don't think it's like a flimsy excuse per se, but I definitely think that, to the point Tyler making that it's Manitoba's turn to host it, I think there's a certain level of like, hey, it's ours, and so we get to and they want to, and so that puts it off. But I would definitely think there's probably a lot of people who are like, hey, it does give us an extra bit of time. I just want to note for the record, July is a really good time to go to Winnipeg. And the question was, do you still go to Winnipeg or do you move it somewhere else? I would say it's the best time to go to Winnipeg, so it is unfortunate. September's maybe not bad.
Well, that week they can't go to Calgary because the Stampede's going on.
That's right.
That escalates the cost.
There are other things. Yeah, exactly.
But,
so, yeah.
I don't know.
I don't think, Shaun, I don't think it's that it doesn't matter or that they're looking for a way out or whatever. But I definitely think that there likely is enough going on of other things that perhaps they'll be more focused at a later meeting than one happening in a month.
How far is Canoe taking the don't travel to Winnipeg for non-necessarily reasons? Because he was one of the big ones promoting like, hey, come to Manitoba from a tourist perspective. So is like those two things are kind of colliding. Has the messaging changed on that then, Kelvin?
Well, I think just in the real short term right now, as some of these evacuees have started returning to the communities already where the risk is diminished, but there are other media outlets have reported that there are 15,000 hotel rooms in Manitoba, and there are 21,000 some people that have been evacuated. And so there have been evacuees, of course, sent to Niagara Falls because there's hotel rooms in southern Ontario. It is a situation, and there's people in hockey rinks, and the situation there isn't ideal either in terms of the temporary setup, and people don't want to stay there for more than a couple nights if they don't have to. And so I think this is just a short-term thing. The question, though, that I have is how quickly these evacuees will actually move back to some of their homes and their communities, especially if there is actual fire damage. There's been issues with flooding in northern Manitoba years ago, and some of those people still live in Winnipeg in temporary accommodations. And so I'm not sure that September might not be that much better in terms of hotel availability and capacity in Winnipeg.
Yeah. So you're going to, how long, I guess, here's a question. And I'm not trying to be a jerk about this, but how long does Manitoba get to hold the conch here? Like let's say
for a year
in the fall.
There's precedent too for this. So it's not that many years ago that this meeting was canceled in 2020. It was supposed to be in Guelph in July 2020. It was it was postponed to the fall, and they were going to hold it, I believe, in September or October in Guelph. And of course, this was during all the restrictions around COVID. That's why it didn't happen. It got kicked down to October, and then they postponed it again. And all of a sudden, we were in an election cycle in 2021, and I believe that in-person Guelph meeting finally happened in November of 2021. So Ontario held the conch for a full year and a half there. So I'm not sure.
We're not hosting the Olympics here. Like it's a get together.
It's the FPT Olympics, Shaun.
Right. It's the FPT Olympics.
again.
If you could ask the ministers to do like one sport in the spirit of track meet, if we could have some sort of like competition, what would it be?
It'd be the Oreo one, where you have to catch the Oreo
on your face.
Anyway,
I think the bigger issue, Shaun, is that I know guys like you get caught up in process and kind of timing and where.
You know me.
What matters to me
process.
are results and outcomes. And what I think that we should be talking about is how do we make sure we get results and outcomes, not what time of the year that the meeting takes place at, because that should matter a lot less to farmers and food processors and everyone across the country.
Yeah, but
what
so
are they actually
delay because of fires, or do we get rid of, or do we push it off because we need to be prepared for it? Like those are two different things, you guys. Like which one is it? You can't have both.
I think by you guys you mean Tyler. So Tyler, take it away.
My point is, I think it's delayed because of the fires, but what should matter is, again, what do they do in the meantime to make sure that when they do see each other face to face, something important comes of it. And I wish, Shaun, we would spend more time talking about the important issues those ministers should be dealing with and less time about when's the meeting going to be.
Huh. Really? I'm not smart enough to figure out if you're talking trash to me or you're actually... Anyway,
okay.
We're going to take a break. Yeah. We'll be back with more of the RealAg Issues Panel right after this.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Mazik Seeds and Lalamon Plant Care.
We're joined right now by Greg Stewart, who is Syngenta Canada's biological field specialist. Okay, Greg, today we're going to talk about 4-yield drive. Okay, what is that?
To consider that there are 4 yield components to corn. That is rows around and length, final ear count, and kernel mass. You can make some good decisions and have some great discussions when you know those 4 yield components. And 4-yield drive is sort of just asking us to be a little bit more careful about our agronomy, look at those 4 yield components so we can make better decisions. It's not rocket science, finding the weakness and looking how to fix it.
Definitely things to keep in mind for the 2025 growing season. Now, Greg mentioned some of the components here of 4-yield drive. You can talk to your local Syngenta rep, or I encourage you to go to syngenta.ca. We're back for the RealAg Issues Panel. Shaun Haney, your host here. Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture, as well as Tyler McCann, Managing Director at CAPI. Hey, register for the Soils for Our Future conference. It's a gathering of global to local perspectives. Join the industry July 20th through the 25th, 2025 at the RBC Convention Center in Winnipeg. Learn about global perspectives, today's research to sustain our future. Register today at soilsforourfuture.ca. Okay. Well, during the commercial break, we had a big argument on who is a bigger supporter of Carney, Kelvin or Tyler. Lyndsey, you have to break the tie.
Absolutely not. I think what was discussed during the break was how much we decide for other people who they are supporters of. And that is it's a hallmark of this show. We get to infer what other people are, and then they argue about it.
A lot of labeling that goes on around here.
There is a lot of labeling, and I support it.
I just want to be clear for everyone, Shaun. In like my defense, all that I was noting is that my neck is sore because of the whiplash of Kelvin's different changing positions. And it's not just me that has noted this.
Oh.
I do believe Megan last week also noted Kelvin's changing positions on things. And so some of us that are maybe don't talk to Kelvin as often just have a hard time kind of figuring out where is he going to be today. You know?
Well, in Kelvin's defense, I'll reach into the RealAg mailbag. And I did have an audience member that said to me this week, he's like, you know what, I really appreciate what Real Agriculture does. I love listening to the podcast and all the different content. Is Kelvin Heppner that guy's smart? Like, yes, he is. Yes, he is.
He sees it from all sides, everybody.
I'll second the audience commentary that Kelvin's a smart guy. No taking that away from him.
There you go.
G7 this weekend. And I guess, Lyndsey, from your perspective, what's a good outcome?
So I will tell you that I am fresh off listening to the Frontlines podcast, where Jacob Shapiro essentially says, it doesn't matter. And I thought that was refreshing. What's a good outcome? Sorry,
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question in that, I guess we've heard who's coming. I guess we see if everybody actually shows up. There's some controversy over who's invited, who actually does show up. I guess, I don't know. At this point, given the week that we've had in the world, I feel like a good outcome is it's very boring. And that, because I don't know that my brain can handle any more controversy. So I would like everyone to perhaps just talk to each other and walk away and maybe just be on some neutral footing. That would be a win in my mind.
I said essentially that on RFD TV this morning, and when we were talking with the G7. I think a good outcome is just it's normal.
It's normal.
Quiet.
Just chill.
Although on Agri Talk we did speculate about how probability is it's not.
That's right.
So there is.
I said what I want. I didn't say what was going to happen. So.
Interesting enough, this will be the first time that Mexico's President Sheinbaum, Prime Minister Carney, and President Trump, same place, same time, same dinner party. Kelvin, I think that's a good thing.
Certainly, yes. I think it is a good thing, and I didn't have a chance to say thank you to the listener if that was actually a real comment or if you just made up.
Oh, no, it was. I'll tell you off air who it was. You know the person. It was a very nice comment.
Thank you. I think I agree with both of you. The win for Canada in this is in hosting and bringing everyone together, building trust, being a bridge builder, a connector. Worst case scenario is, I think, what happened and what everybody is dancing around right now. What happened in Quebec the last time Canada hosted the G7 when Trump blew up on the way, whether there was a blow up between Trump and Trudeau on the way out of that meeting. The Canadian government has already said that there won't be a joint statement coming at the end of this meeting. And so I think inviting all these extra countries, there's almost 10 different countries that are invited to this meeting that aren't normally at the G7, is smart in terms of Canada's image around the world, being a connector and having these friends and allies and countering, of course, a lot of this within the G7 would be 6 versus 1. It would be the rest. It would be the U.S. and Trump versus all the other countries, and this kind of dilutes that. And I think there's going to be chances here with all these other countries. There's chances for wins, small wins on bilateral relationships all over the place. That kind of dilutes any chance of like one big issue where it's the U.S. versus everybody kind of thing. And I think that is maybe the best case, and again, a win for Canada in terms of being this country that the rest of the world sees as bringing everyone together.
Yeah, and from an egg perspective, like Modi attending is an opportunity.
Yeah, and there's trade focus. There's acknowledgement from our current government of trade being important here. This isn't all about the progressive aspects of the CPTPP negotiation, for example.
Yeah, Tyler, what are your thoughts?
I think that there's the way that you've talked about a normal outcome being a win has downplayed how big of a deal that actually would be, right? Like, we are in a radically different world today geopolitically than we have been in recent history. That would be no minor accomplishment achieving a normal outcome. I think if you look at the distance that the country's come in the last several months to reassert itself on the global stage. If you look at that re-engagement with China and with India that the Prime Minister's undertaken, navigating that relationship with the United States, taking the pressure off of that. The fact that we've got all of this kind of this pool of world leaders coming to Canada, and coming to Canada in a context where it looks like they will be able to have a constructive dialogue, like that is a really major accomplishment. And again, I think if we say it's, this is just normal, like I think it downplays the fact that this is really significant. And again, I think let's be honest, a year ago, Canada could not have pulled that off. We did not have the serious leadership in the country at the time that was needed to deliver something like this. And I think it's important to recognize that.
And I think too, it's an opportunity for Carney, as obviously our Prime Minister, our representative, to reestablish a place for Canada amongst all of these leaders. So there is, in the past, it really became about Trump and Trudeau. There's an opportunity here for Carney to be really seen, if done properly. This is difficult to navigate, but to be a little bit of the guy in the room that's like, hey, you need to talk, like kind of be a bit of the in-between here, which is kind of a role, honestly, that Canada traditionally has kind of excelled at.
That's what Canada did coming out of World War II. Canada was that in terms of building some of the multinational institutions that have built our world today and our trading system today. We've definitely forfeited that role over the last couple decades. But that was what Canada was, and to use Tyler's former boss's one of his favorite phrases, that's what allowed Canada to punch above its weight in a lot of these situations. So, to me, like you said, Shaun, it's in that connecting people and bringing them together, and to what Tyler was saying, the Carney government has done several things here to set the stage for this too, as well, for it to go better than it would have gone a year ago in terms of bringing legislation forward. This border security bill. There's the announcement this week about the NATO, meeting the NATO funding 2% this year. Never mind in 2030, as Carney campaigned on. It sounds like there could be something new coming on tariffs on China here in the next couple days. So there's definitely been some movement to align with the U.S. and try to make this more of a productive, constructive meeting next week.
And a key thing for him to do is, if they do as a group go whitewater rafting, I highly encourage that he make sure that President Trump's not sitting in the seat that he gets launched out of the boat. Do not do that. That will set things astray in a bad direction. Tyler, you
put in that seat Lyndsey?
Well, I don't.
You know what? Someone, a nondescript
you put in the seat?
Somebody.
Here we go.
A placeholder. That's who you put. Someone who's going to take one for the team. That's who you put in there. Go ahead.
I wanted to build on kind of Kelvin's comment, because there was a bit of a contrast on it. You started off by saying this is the role that Canada played, but Kelvin pointed out a really important piece of that. We played that after the Second World War, and we have fallen into this trap of thinking that this is Canada's place in the world, but we have to go back 80 years to be able to kind of see when we really did that. Clearly, it's not been something that the last Prime Minister excelled at. Stephen Harper was better, but his track record around global leadership was not particularly great either. I think that there wasn't the same ambition to be a global leader. Again, conservative and liberal governments of the past have driven defense spending down. I think often we forget that coming after the Second World War, Canada had the third largest navy in the world. Yeah. Like, we were a major power, and all of that slid out of the way. And so, like, again, I think that, I think we're in the space, if you look at the commitments that the Prime Minister's made and where the government wants to go in defense spending, maybe it doesn't all go 100%. Maybe they only deliver on 75% of what they're committing to. Well, that 75% is still so much further than where we have been in the past. That is a major accomplishment if they can pull it off.
Yeah. Would Brian Mulroney be the last Prime Minister that kind of held that a little? No,
before that, even before.
Yeah, I think
before Trudeau the Senior, I'd say it already. I think he tipped the direction already.
Yeah, Trudeau Senior was much more isolationist. I mean, to be honest, Trudeau the Senior, I don't say this like flippantly, Trudeau the Senior was much more focused on engaging with communist governments around the world. Like, that was, by and large, a big part of his foreign policy. Mulroney, I think, picked his battles. Apartheid in South Africa was a big piece of it. That relationship in North America, that trading relationship, was a big piece of it. But as far as punching above our weight and like really being that kind of strong middle power, I'm going to go back to Pearson.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I believe you.
Are we going to talk about how we're going to find all this money? Like, I'm glad we've made the commitment, but have we seen where this money's going to come from?
I'm actually more worried about our ability to spend it between now and the end of the year. And
that is legit.
There's going to be a lot of
spend it
there will
well,
be scandal.
right?
There will be scandal.
Yeah, spend it where it should get spent
fast.
and
think,
actually do it. Yeah.
I'm all for the 2%. I am worried about how fast we have to spend this money.
But Lyndsey raises a really important point, and I think that you will probably, a year from now, be able to draw a really direct line between that defense spending announcement and reductions in the Agriculture Canada budget, because that is going to drive extra pressure on the need to spend less. I keep going back to this line that Carney used in the leadership campaign and the election campaign, and has used since he's been elected. He wants to spend less and invest more. And I think sometimes we take for granted, we like to kind of forget how much spending actually does happen in agriculture and agri-food Canada. They're spending kind of $1 billion more now than they did 10 years ago. That is, depending on how you do the math, like 50% increase in the budget of that department. A lot of that money is being spent on business risk management programming, but we've also seen this increase in environmental programming under the previous government. Like, there is money in that department that is getting spent that will not be spent in the future. And I think that there's a big question around what does that look like?
But I think it's important. There's an umbrella, a portfolio of departments where it'll be pulling from a number of different departments, not just agriculture.
Across the government. Like this is one of the cabinet committees that the ag minister sits on, right? Is a cabinet committee within its description, its mandate is reducing government spending. I think often there's this sense that we'll just cut the civil service, but we need to be really honest. You could not, you would have to have no civil servants in order to put a dent in that, and that's not reasonable. That's not anything anybody wants. You can only get to the savings if you cut program spending, and that's going to have an impact in agriculture.
Hey everybody, Genesis Fertilizer is making real progress toward providing reliable, locally produced fertilizer. Join the ownership group and protect your bottom line. Learn more by going to genesisfertilizer.com. Right back on RealAg Radio, the RealAg Issues Panel, right after this. Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
It's summertime, and you've got a lot of important decisions to make when it comes to your corn crop. Let the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com help guide you through those big decisions with input from leading experts in the field. If it's spray timing, disease identification, or any other field issue, the Corn School's got you covered. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by BASF and Pride Seeds.
Co-op Ag Zone Bin Logic is the ultimate tool for ensuring the success of your grain operation. Simple, scalable, solar-powered. I like that solar-powered feature. And, of course, cost-effective. Bin Logic lets you monitor your bins from anywhere and everywhere, even the lake, everybody. Contact your co-op equipment team member to learn more. Nothing better than be able to manage the farm from the campground. I like it. Hey, Kelvin, this morning you and I were texting back and forth. The Canadian dollar is on a little bit of a heater here. We're at 73.5 on the Canadian dollar. That may not be good for grain bids.
No, it won't help with our cash prices or local prices basis inside the country. But it's I guess a sign. Not sure that U.S. economy, and we're talking Canadian dollar relative to U.S. dollar, of tariffs potentially having an effect there. Of course, currency market will probably soften any impact of tariffs in some ways by reducing the value of the U.S. dollar. So probably a factor there, and not maybe not great for our prices as we with growing conditions, especially in the U.S. looking strong in the Corn Belt. Not so. There's a big dry area in the western growing areas, and I guess positive news, though, for markets today on the biofuel side of things.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting when I was with Growmark earlier this week in Niagara on the Lake. Beautiful. Niagara on the Lake is beautiful, by the way. Gorgeous. Highly encourage people to go there. Talking to some of those retail managers from the Midwest, crop is off to a great start. Great start. Concerning part is what we heard from Matt Makins, though, on Wednesday, Lyndsey, which is one of the states he's the most concerned about. It's Iowa. I don't know if you know, but there's a lot of corn growing there.
There is. Yeah. And this is one of the things I think, Shaun, you also shared a stat this week about, you know, just how large the corn crop is in some of these states, right? Like there's a reason we look to these areas to drive the supply of the corn crop and keep it in mind when we're thinking about how we're marketing, et cetera. And so like, I think it's easy to sort of get caught up in what's happening in your own backyard, right? And looking at Western Canada and think about crop conditions for Western Canada, huge areas where it is incredibly dry. We've mentioned the wildfire risk, the smoky conditions we heard about as well, and how that impacts the crop. But then there are other areas that really have a much larger impact on the price we get for our crop that either are doing really, really well, and then there's still, of course, some issues that are areas that are struggling. So I think it is really important. The important point is recognizing, you know, which crops and which areas are the ones that are really going to drive a market up or down based on supply. And that's what we really have to unpack with the U.S. corn crop. That's for sure.
Well, great piece of news today. I think, you know, if you're a biofuel supporter, there's lots of adjectives you could attach to it, but it really looks like under Trump 2.0, this EPA led by Administrator Zeldin is kind of maybe surprised everybody today on being as pro biofuel as they look to be here. Kelvin, on bio-based diesel, the industry was looking for 5.25 billion gallons, and depending on which conversion number you use for gallons per RIN, it looks like the RVOs are actually above what the industry was asking for, which is, that's good. That's good for demand.
Certainly, the demand story, this is real bullish news that we got today in this announcement. There are still some question marks around small refiners exemptions in the future SREs and where that's headed. But this was a higher number than expected that you alluded to. We see the market today. Soybeans, last I checked, were up over 25 cents a bushel. Canola prices also surging in Western Canada as well. And so, offsetting some of that impact of currency increase appreciation that we talked about earlier. And this is positive news for the future of biofuel and investment in biofuel, I believe, not just in the US, but in Canada as well, as some of the feedstock requirements, Canadian processed and also seed could potentially meet some of these requirements as well, it sounds like.
Yeah. Tyler, one thing that we found in April with RealAg Studies is Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. We asked for some policy impacts. And a year ago, biofuels, Canadian farmers were quite neutral on them. And now we're to the positive. It was 0.35 on that -2 to +2 schedule or scale. So maybe the opportunity for biofuel demand is kind of getting through to people.
And you would think, especially if it's going to be what buffers any potential fallout from China and whatever else might come there, right, that there's going to be more recognition of the role that plays. I think that there's also an interesting biofuel story, a kind of a play potentially. If we're looking at big projects, building big projects, are there things that the government of Canada could do to get some more of these facilities back going again in Western Canada? To guys, I'm a bit surprised that where there isn't more talk of that. Maybe this news out of the U.S. today will put some more wind in the sails of more of that type of construction. But I think that the bigger thing in my mind is that like this really is a much messier kind of market and landscape that we're in than people want to make it out to be, right? Like let's be honest. When those China tariffs first came on, you were doing interviews with farm leaders saying we need government to bail us out. The market, even before the announcement today, had fully made up for anything that they'd lost and then gained some. Since then, I think we're like 17% higher than we were a year ago or something like that in canola prices, and it's complicated and it's messy and it's hard for farmers to make marketing decisions. But I think it's also hard for all of us to understand like what's the world look like or today, let alone this fall, and how do you kind of plan for it? There's a lot of moving parts out there, and and it's getting more complicated.
Well, sorry, Kelvin, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we haven't even mentioned the Israel-Iran events of the last 24 hours either, and the impact that's having on the oil market and energy market, of course, translates into our biofuel, or as it ties into our biofuel market and value of crops there too. So that's another factor that is a huge driver of prices and decisions there that kind of overnight changed dramatically yesterday.
Yeah. Tyler, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to take it back to that FPT conversation earlier. I think that all of this should drive home the fact that our risk management programs that farmers have access to are not well suited to all of the other risks that farmers actually face today and actually have to grapple with on farms. And I hope if they've got an extra couple of months, they spend some of that time having a more serious conversation about the volatile landscape that farmers are farming in today and what changes they can make to programs to get better, more effective risk management support out of them.
Yeah, Lyndsey?
Well, I just, I don't know if I missed it in the tsunami of stuff, but one of the things on this biofuel question, are we still waiting for the language on 45Z on the feedstock side? Because that's one major question for our canola market. Like that, to Tyler's point, also further complicates all of this.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, detail. It doesn't look like the details on 45Z at the time of us doing this recording. The details are going to be out.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Everything's lining up that domestic feedstock will be North American feedstock. So,
which would be super good news.
And if I did that interview when I was down in DC over a month ago with NOPA, they taught, that's the language that they're using now. Things have cooled down a little bit where we can talk about these things kind of publicly from some of the organizations. So it's, and like I've said before, for canola to have scale, it needs the Canadian acre. So if North Dakota canola growers want canola to be, a big push here, you need the scale of the Canadian market. So
yeah, absolutely. It is one of those like win-wins, really.
Right. The carbon intensity scoring, that's a concern.
That's a different beast where canola does not fare as well as soybeans because you have to use nitrogen fertilizer for canola. So
there is going to be some boardrooms in the biofuel sector today that had conference calls that are like going to feel like there's a little less political risk in this market on biofuels than there was yesterday. Yeah. I think, and that's good for investment. Mm-hmm. It's good for investment.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sorry. It was somewhat cheeky, but this is still one of the things that I struggle with a little bit is in Canada, we still have a lot of Western Canadian farmers, especially, who push back on biofuel mandates for lots of reasons and the clean fuel standards and all these, or whatever it's called. And I still struggle with that one a bit in that I feel like this is one of those ones where like this is a major driver of consumption of these products that we sell in Western Canada. And without it, it's a very different picture. So I just throwing that out there that it's still one of the ones I struggle with.
Yeah, no, good point. What's interesting though, and I don't have, we did this in April and I don't have the East-West breakdown. Mm-hmm. I know a year ago when we asked about it, Western Canadian farmers were actually more positive on biofuels than Eastern Canadian farmers, which I've always felt was backwards to what I thought would be the case. But that's,
okay.
Overall, I think the whole tide could lift all the ships.
Yes.
We could be a lot more positive on it.
And I think it speaks to the need to have a bit of a better understanding, right, around how value chains for a lot of commodities work. And I think that the average farmer is a lot more sophisticated today than they were before. But I think if you asked a beef farmer today, what's going on that's making your beef calves worth all of that much more, they may not have a full understanding of it. I think if you talked about canola pressures in the marketplace and what's driving it and what's got the floor where it is, people may not kind of fully understand these things too. Like I think that's something that somebody that's listening to the show has probably got a sophisticated understanding of it. I know you guys put a lot of effort into it, but there is something to be said for that need for a little bit more education and understanding of how all of these different kind of moving pieces impact farmers so that they can make better decisions at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, we got live cattle and feeder cattle down in pretty deep red here today. Some analysts saying it has to do with an announcement on screwworm from the USDA next week, and some people saying it has to do with concern over packing plants and some of the ice raids and where that goes going forward. So, that's having both of those having impacts on these cattle markets here today. Okay, let's take a break. We got more coming up here on the RealAg Issues Panel. We'll be back right after this.
I'm Lyndsey Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lyndsey Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Lyndsey, how beautiful is Quebec City?
So beautiful. And the coffee is amazing. And so is the food. And the people are great. Highly recommend.
It's as close as you can get to being in a European city without going to Europe.
That's true.
Because I say this, because the 2025 Seeds Canada Annual Conference is happening in Quebec City, July 7th through the 9th at the Hilton, Quebec. In Quebec City, you're going to have insightful speakers, insights into the latest industry trends, regulatory changes, and technological advancements that are shaping the future of the seed sector. Exciting, no doubt. Register today at seeds-canada.ca/annual conference. And if you can't get that, just Google Seeds Canada, Quebec City. Here's what I recommend that you do. Okay, Tyler, next week you're at a meeting. What are you going to?
I'm going to Olds. I've been by Olds, but never been to Olds, so I'm looking forward to that. Not quite sure it's Quebec City in July, though, but looking forward to going to Olds just the same. So I'm going, the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation of Agriculture, which probably most people listening have never heard of before, is hosting an Ag and America's Forum in Olds. And so what IECA is kind of like the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, but for the Americas. And the big difference is that IECA really is focused on a lot of the things that are going to be really important to Canadian farmers. It is about productivity growth. It is about trade. They understand the critical role that the Americas play in exporting food around the world. They've been quite a voice of reason when the UN's been out talking about food systems and changing things. IECA has been trying to reinforce the message that, the food system isn't broken. The food system's done a really good job producing a lot more food, a lot more sustainably, and driving down things like food insecurity around the world. Yeah. And so IECA, again, they're effectively every country in the Americas is a member. They look at agriculture across it, and they're bringing people into Olds to talk about how do we kind of work together in this context in the Americas to try and drive change. So I get to go out and moderate the first panel there. And I'm going to talk about what does the opportunity look like? What are the practical things that we can all be doing in this context to work together?
Sounds like a bit of a black tie affair, very stuffy. Lyndsey?
Oh, well, I just wanted to mention, I'm looking here. Tyler, it says you're the panel you are moderating has the Brazil's Minister of Agriculture and a Canadian Minister of Agriculture, Heath MacDonald. So,
I think that might be a little bit out of date because I'm not aware that I don't think that Minister MacDonald is actually able to attend in the end. I think they've got somebody from the department coming. So unless that's changed.
Well, maybe. I don't know. I heard it yesterday.
Great to have Minister MacDonald attend, but I had not been told that he was on my panel. Again, it's kind of quite a diverse group of people.
Tyler, just to say, it's usually a sign of a good moderator. They know who's on the panel.
I know. Well, this is not, again, I feel quite caught off guard that all of a sudden that Heath MacDonald's on the panel and I don't know anything about it. But again, it's like one of the things we want to get into to set the stage is like we talk a lot about differences, and clearly a farmer like where I am in Western Quebec versus Olds, obviously very different. In Olds versus Guyana, pretty different. But like there are a tremendous amount of things that are in common. Things like it is going to be innovation and R&D that's going to make farmers more profitable and more productive, right? And we need better ways to do it, and we need to protect access to those innovations, and we need to make sure that we've got market access for crops produced with them. Like, those are the things that we're going to get into that I think are a way to focus on what unites us, and how do we, as the Americas, get to be kind of that agriculture superpower that we should be in the world.
Kelvin, I got a press release this morning about from Senator Black regarding soil and a new piece of legislation. What's going on here?
Yeah, this is follow through on the soil strategy that Senator Black has been leading over the last couple of years and the committee did some work on as well, and he brought forward a bill in the Senate this week to implement a soil health policy. It's something that we'll follow up on next week for sure, in terms of getting into the details of what this means and what the prospects are for this bill moving ahead. But yeah, more discussion focus on soil and preserving farmland across Canada, and Senator Black continuing to put a spotlight on it. I was going to say Minister McDonald is on his way west. He is in Saskatchewan, I think today and tomorrow. For sure, he's meeting with Saskatchewan Ag Minister Daryl Harrison tomorrow, and so it's good to see. He talked about getting his boots on the ground as a new ag minister, and looks like I believe this is his first trip out to Saskatchewan as the ag minister. So starting to see some of that come to fruition.
Sure, he'll be in Alberta for Stampede and the big ag reception that I'm emceeing again. We always have so much fun, get the whole industry together, and I'm sure he'll be at that too.
I feel like this is like a new sport of who gets to. I mean, Shaun, I know you've spoken with him.
Well,
who gets to meet with him first?
Yeah, well, that one is sponsored by McDonald's, so they always have great McDonald's ice cream and cookie for the dessert, and it's always, of course, the best prime rib that they serve at that thing. But
I think one of the things that we're waiting to see is, when is Minister McDonald's first big speech where he says kind of something big about the sector, and maybe it's going to be Stampede. I guess it's not going to be FPT the week after at this point in time, but we're starting to see more ministers and cabinet out kind of talking about what their agenda looks like. One of the things that Minister McDonald's been doing is listening to a lot of different people. You look at his Twitter feed, and it seems like if there's a farm group in this country, Minister McDonald's met with them. But
yeah, a lot of pictures.
One of the problems in agriculture is that they all tell him different things, and now it's time to wait and see what he actually has to say about it.
Okay, well, he's going to get out. Well, see, that's why I think it's unfortunate that they had to postpone. I think it's part of the showing action part is let's get everybody together and sort of what we need to do. And yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's the reality of it. Okay, that's all the time we have today. We rushed through that. For those of you listening to the RealAg Radio podcast, stay tuned, because we're going to get to what we didn't cover, because I know there's a few things like get Lyndsey's point of view, what's going on between Iran and Israel. That's situation.
So don't.
Plus a whole lot more. If you have any feedback on today's show, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, or call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Hey, also want to thank everybody that continues to listen to this show on Rural Radio 147. Our audience continues to grow. We got the numbers in the last couple of weeks to prove it across Canada and the U.S., and we are internally grateful. We really want to thank everybody that tunes in here on a regular basis. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio, and chat again next week. Cheers. It's really interesting that Tyler's biggest complaint is we didn't talk about sports during the show today.
Shaun, I came prepared to talk about.
Did you watch the hockey game last night?
No, I fell asleep. It's too late, man.
You know what? I don't blame you. You people live in the Eastern time zone. Sports suck in the Eastern time zone. It is way better for us in the mountain.
Especially whenever hockey games end in overtime all of the time. It really is.
The basketball game the other night started at 8:30 Eastern. Who is staying up for that? I go to bed at 8:30.
I was trying to figure out, Shaun, if we're not talking about Edmonton pulling it out in the end because they're doing well, and you as a Calgary guy just can't accept that.
It was a great game though last night. It really was.
I wouldn't know.
Can I just say though, the puck over the glass in the defensive zone penalty, that is one of the dumbest rules that we have in hockey.
It is. It's pretty dumb.
It is dumb. You could cross-check somebody in the face, get away with it, but if you put the puck over the glass in the defensive zone, that's a penalty. I hate that one. And I was texting with a buddy last night, Edmonton Oilers fan. He's like, the one that gets me is like, you entered the offensive zone, you're in there for like 3 minutes, you score, but the goal can be called back because of review of the offside. Also stupid. Don't like that one either. I agree with that one. Hockey has some really dumb rules.
Tyler, I've just decided that there's something worse than talking about sportsing, and it's the rules of sportsing.
Yeah,
That's
I came prepared to talk about how Edmonton pulled it out of its butt last night. Not came to prepared what's the silliest rule in hockey. That's
exactly.
Out of my area of expertise.
Yeah, I will say it's a good series. It's a lot of fun. But
it is great.
It is. But it's a great matchup again. But anyway,
two best teams, right? Pretty clearly.
It's true. Yep.
And Taylor was at the game last night, which my wife was very excited about.
Yes, I'd love that you're on a first name basis with Taylor Swift.
Did you see Wayne Gretzky was sitting with them?
I think there was AI.
There was a good Spit and Chicklets picture on Instagram of Gretzky, Kelsey, and Taylor Swift.
Gretzky turns out a pretty good diplomat, right? Hanging out with Trump and with Taylor Swift, and so.
Oh no, Tyler! We've written him off. We've written him off. Hand in your passport, Mr. Gretzky.
Next ambassador.
Oh goodness!
Why not? Our current one is really good, though.
Our current one, yes.
Trade negotiator. That's why we need to give good credit to the good Canadian trade negotiators.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whose jobs are going to be harder because 202 is going to sail through the Senate here and pass and tie their hands when it comes time to negotiate trade deals.
Everybody keeps on telling me we're just going to get around it. What are you worried about?
I think we will. They will probably get around it, but just makes their life harder. I mean, they're going to be in contravention of an act of Parliament while they're doing their job.
I just love the fact that we're doing something and the other side's not even asking for it. It's like we're having an argument with ourselves.
We're preemptively untying our shoelaces before we race.
Yes. That is one of the things that is lost on me. Like, I don't know how, there's not a week that goes by that somebody doesn't say to me in a speech or just an email or a text, hey, do you think Trump's going to get rid of supply management? No.
Of all of the issues that the country faces, this is not near the top of the list of them. But I don't know. People make it out. I'm pretty convinced that the reason why it's such a big deal is because it's actually relatively simple to understand, right? It's easy to say, I support supply management, or I don't support supply management. And I think for most of the people that are saying most of the things about it, that's the extent of their knowledge on the issue, is they know they support it or they know that they don't. And that's why they don't talk about other things that are more complicated, because they don't get it. And I think that's also some high profile people that I think don't understand the issue, that spend a lot of time shooting their mouth off about it, that if they understood a little bit more, they'd have a little bit more of a nuanced, sophisticated view.
Earlier in the show, Tyler, you mentioned cuts to AFC's budget and how much goes into BRM. I think there is also some awareness with some of these politicians that they are not bailing out. Agri-stability is not, or other insurance programs aren't going to the supply managed sectors, and I think that is also part of it too.
Do we want to get into this? Are we gonna have a discussion about? Are we gonna?
Wait, let me go get my popcorn and then
bonus segment.
I mean,
bonus segment.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
Do whatever we want.
If we opened up the marketplace and we did make those farmers be eligible to those programs, especially the way that the programs are constructed today, it's not going to cost government that much money. Like this is not, and that's partly the fault of poor risk management programs. I mentioned that earlier. We need to get more effective ones. But Kelvin, this is not going to significantly change the cost of the BRM suite if we make these farms eligible for agri-stability, right? That's not. I think it's a red herring of an issue, and maybe farmers think that it doesn't cost them. Maybe people think that, but the facts don't line up to that.
Look at how much oxygen is used up in the U.S. talking about dairy policy and dairy.
Yeah, but look at how much oxygen is used up on any income support program that they have in the United States. That's not how things work in Canada. And if the big change again is that they get access to agri-stability and agri-invest, it's not costing the Canadian government. It's not going to cost the Canadian government $100 million a year. Like that's those programs don't work well enough for it to make that big of a difference. The bigger issue, again, the biggest BRM expense is crop insurance, and that's where the costs come from. So we could get rid of supply management and make those farmers eligible for agri-stability and agri-invest. But I don't think Finance Canada notices that.
My understanding is that, and there's going to be some changes, some of the crop insurance allocations in the budget reconciliation bill if it passes, but the percentages in terms of how much Canada subsidizes crop insurance premiums versus U.S. is not that different.
No, crop insurance. I guess I have strong views on crop insurance in Canada. It is. I don't think people appreciate how expensive of a program it is. I don't think people realize. So, for example, we often talk about the agri-stability trigger, right, as a 70%, like your margin has to decline 30% in order to do it. I don't think people realize that we subsidize crop insurance premiums in some cases up to 90 or 95%, right? So you're only getting a 5% decline and you're paying out. And again, the government's paying 60% of that. I think if we wanted to get more equal treatment across things, if you want more than 70% coverage, then you should have to pay the full cost of it. And that would make crop insurance a lot more expensive for Western Canadian farmers. It's probably why it's never going to happen. But I think that we don't understand how generous these things are. And yeah, I think that those commodity support titles, or whatever they would refer to it in the Farm Bill context, are pretty similar.
Yeah, here's what's interesting though. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see this. Here's those areas of policy impact analysis. And I found it interesting. So agri-stability is noted as being a positive policy at 0.18, again, out of 2. And crop insurance, where is that on here?
It's 0.8. It's the highest.
It's almost the highest.
It's almost the highest. No, I think there is. That's farmers recognizing that crop insurance is.
Is it though, or do they just see it as crop insurance?
Well, it says crop insurance subsidies.
Yeah, again, but just because that's what it says doesn't mean that's what people read.
And I think so maybe kind of for a future question, Shaun, you could ask people how much they think that program costs today.
Like as a percentage or whatever. Like how much is it cost shared?
Oh, okay, to be fair though to farmers, like there's a lot of there's a lot of things that we don't fully understand how the sausage is made or appreciate what got us there. We do know the outcome. I think that's putting a lot of pressure on farmers to like, what percent do you think? Like, I don't know.
Well,
Shaun, I don't know if that's fair.
Go ahead, Lyndsey.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it is fair to the point of recognizing that as a grain producer, there are potentially programs that you participate in that are heavily supported and subsidized that you may not view as a subsidy or be fully aware of. So in my mind, it's more about, you don't have to fully like dig into the penny, how much is subsidized, whatever. And I'm not even arguing that we should or should not have this. I think we need decent risk management programs. But our risk management programs, including crop insurance, are a way that our federal government and provincial governments, depending on which program it is, can support their farmers. It is subsidized. It doesn't mean it's a good or bad thing, but I think it's an awareness and a recognition. Like as a livestock producer, I participate in my provincial RMP program for my lamb, and I know for a fact that the premiums that I pay that is not what the whole program is funded by. It is heavily, heavily subsidized by my provincial government. And that is how the provincial government supports its livestock producers. So it's an awareness of understanding exactly that, how the sausage is made.
And I think that there's a need.
We don't have a national cattle price insurance program, which is that people should be aware of that too. Which
I can't get any production insurance for my livestock. I can't for crops. I can't for sheep. So anyway,
And again, what I always find challenging at times is that we hear a lot of farmers react when they see, billions of dollars of subsidies going to another sector, and they say, what about agriculture? And yet, at the meantime, there's a couple $1 billion a year being spent on these programs, right? And so it's just important to keep that in perspective, especially in an era when we're in tightening government budgets. And there's more pressure around how that dollar is getting spent. One of the things I always think I don't know why governments do this, but they talk about how the 5-year FPT agreement's like a $3 billion agreement, $3.5 billion agreement, but that doesn't include all of the BRM spending that goes into it. And these days, over 5 years, that's about an extra $10 billion. And I think that we just need to be more aware of that cost, and I think that there's a big question around: is that the right way to support the sector and get kind of the investments, the changes that we needed at the end of the day?
What I think they should do, I said this at a meeting this week, I think what they should do is just slap a new name on AgriStability, and all of a sudden, new program, new name.
They might.
See how it changes and moves the needle in terms of what people think about it.
And one of the problems with AgriStability is that, like, it's a good idea, right? That type of margin coverage that governments could offer farmers should be the best coverage that a farmer can get. In theory, when that happens, whatever kind of risk you get hit with, that margin coverage is there. But it was a good idea, taken and done very poorly, and clearly doesn't kind of meet the moment. It's an issue. Okay,
Lyndsey, what did we not cover today?
I think I was going to write some things down and I didn't. I think I will touch on, and we have touched on this, like on Monday show, etc. But I think the weather story. So you did this week. We've covered it on the show, just maybe not today as much. You covered it with Matt Makins, etc. But here in Ontario, anyway, like. And we did this on our poll last week. It's still up. I got to refresh it on the website. Just, what are your challenges for this early season, for this growing season? And I will tell you, like, to the point of Tyler wearing a big sweater, it has been a very slow start to the growing season here. And we have some very not great looking soybean fields, hay fields that are well behind, corn that still has had to come through some things. And then we've got out west, we've got just incredible drought in some areas. And it is like, it's not a great, like, feel good story for a lot of areas as far as the start. And so I will just, from my perspective, there's definitely, and little plug for Monday's show. Monday's episode of The Agronomist is on stress, crop stress, abiotic and biotic stress, and what we can and cannot do about it. And so very timely, given the kind of spring we were having across Canada, but also it's the 200th episode.
Oh, yes.
So I just want to throw that out there.
Also, Macon's had a pretty good forecast for Central and Eastern Canada.
Yeah.
It was pretty good.
Hey, don't get me wrong. We are not flooding and we are not in a drought. We are moisture-wise decent, but it is very behind, and because it's been very cool and because we didn't have great starting conditions, we have a lot of like that hangover of people planted into wet soil, and we've got crusting and all sorts. And also, like, again, my hay fields I've needed those 3 dry days and haven't been able to get it, but also haven't had a ton of moisture. So anyway, there's again a mosquito trying to get me, everybody. I have more mosquitoes than Kelvin has. That's all you need to know. And he's in Manitoba. So yeah.
Come to Winnipeg. Oh wait, don't come to Winnipeg.
Don't come to Wob Canoe said I cannot, Kelvin. I'm not allowed. That's what he said.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Can't. Tourism Manitoba is going to take a hit.
Yeah. Closed.
Yeah, everyone's going to go to Stampede instead.
I think I'll just stay.
Very expensive.
Yeah.
Get a hotel room for Stampede. I'm like out in the south end by like $600 and some dollars.
Sleep in your Jeep. Like, how much do people actually spend time in there?
So I did that one time. Rooms? I was out at a farm in Saskatchewan, and Jeff Bennett's farm actually.
Oh, okay.
And he had that big barbecue. Remember, he had that big weekend,
yes.
that big barbecue that one summer.
I do remember it. I
wasn't invited. Truck.
That's fine.
Been done before.
I know. I see nothing wrong with sleeping in your vehicle every once
in a while. Especially a Jeep.
I mean,
it feels like it's kind of on brand. Like if you
that's right.
Rolling in like, a Camaro or like a really nice
that would be terrible
SUV.
Yeah, but a Jeep, that makes sense.
Jeep is like kind of meant to do that. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's probably like an aftermarket thing from Mopar you can buy that top your Jeep into a bed.
You should get that. Actually, I joked about it, I think, in the break, but this is the solution to this FPT meeting, is everyone should just camp at one of the beautiful beaches in Manitoba. Just everybody bring a tent and marshmallows and kumbaya, and away we go.
So speaking of camping, I get excited about stuff that happens in the fall, and you probably know where this is going.
Oh God.
I'm going RVing into Ames.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Got plans with some buddies to go to the Iowa State ASU game. Ames, and we are renting an RV.
Oh my gosh.
We are camping at the field.
Just one for all of you guys?
We'll see how she goes.
Are you road tripping there or just like renting it there for the weekend?
I think we're meeting in Minneapolis. I think.
Perfect.
Okay.
I don't know, but
please, please take pictures and video and share this fully.
Yeah, that full tailgate of names. I'm looking forward to that game for sure. Okay, Kelvin, what did we not cover?
Maybe touched on it a bit, but this Israel or Iran thing, I think, and how long-lasting the impact of this is, both geopolitically and in the energy markets. I think there's lots of potential impact there. Geopolitically, if the U.S. gets more involved, there's question marks about the level of involvement the U.S. had in this initial attack by Israel, and China and Russia, of course, where they land in terms of that taking sides. And then on the energy market, we have here at home lots of talk about pipeline construction and projects in the national interest. And if this means elevated oil prices for a while, what that does in terms of having proponents for some of these projects come forward and driving some of the agenda there in terms of government revenue and what's happening when it comes to Alberta relations with the rest of the country and what the Carney government is trying to implement.
I was I'm just looking for it. I was texting because we did the new Frontlines episode recording on Thursday. So stuff happened Thursday night. Some would call it as they say in Top Gun, it's a live situation. Join in okay, so I asked, hey, what are the American options on what's happened here overnight? Okay. And Jacob said, join in and bomb, convert support, stay out of it, or be the peacemaker. Is kind of a lot of different directions, basically, is what could happen. I think the factor is one of the things here is that the U.S. is just, and Jacob made this point in the Frontlines podcast, is the U.S. really doesn't need Middle Eastern oil. Not as big of a concern to them as it previously was before fracking.
Also, there's a lack of coherent U.S. foreign policy just in general these days that makes all of these things tough.
Well, now you're going to get to my thing about what we didn't talk about, which I thought was a bit of a signal this week, was the trade negotiations with Japan. Japan's taking a different approach. So up until now, the UK is a really good example. I think Canada kind of fits into this. In some ways, Mexico does too. These deals are, whether they're an MOU or they're like a 5-point plan, there's some sort of a very shallow agreement on some sort of a couple threads that are important to the Oval Office, and countries being willing to say, take the win. Okay. Japan's message today was, we basically agree on nothing and we want there to be a comprehensive agreement. Kelvin, that's an entirely different tack than we've been seeing.
Well, and I guess maybe why not try something different? Maybe that's the idea there. And I also saw this week that there were senior officials in the U.S. Trade Representative's office saying that the U.S. is maybe just looking at a review of CUSMA or USMCA now too. So who knows? It's like Tyler said, there isn't a unified strategy on a lot of these fronts.
Yeah, I've been fascinated by the story of Bessent maybe being the next chairman of the Federal Reserve, which could be bad too, or because he would be leaving the administration.
Right.
I think but he doesn't think a tariff is a tax either.
Exactly. I think Kelvin just summed it up with the who knows. That is
how it feels today.
That's how it feels today with America. Who knows?
Well, Canada's had its fair share of.
Sure, but I'm just going to least said, soonest mended. Everybody, that's what I'm going with right now on that.
Yeah, the tackling of a senator was not a good look. There's that. No. I said this earlier on a team call where we were talking about the situation in LA, and I said, for the record, I think everybody's in the wrong, and it kind of felt the same way again with this whole thing that happened at the Nome press conference. Just everybody calm the hell down. Just just continually feels like everyone's in the wrong, and everybody could be better. I don't know.
Again, I know that there's lots of views, and probably our U.S. listeners are going to disagree with me, but I would say that the U.S. government sending troops into U.S. cities is pretty firmly in the wrong. That's not an everyone in the wrong situation. That is something, if that happened in the Canadian context, I would be
we did in Ottawa
over this.
By the way, we did in Ottawa.
We did not send troops. We did not send
military.
Canadian equivalent of the Marines.
We sent RACMP.
And we sent them in to clean out a protest that had taken over downtown Ottawa for a month. And I don't think that's what happened. That's what was going on in LA. And so I don't know.
I look at it as I see.
I think that
wrong
there's
with
too much of this, like it's a pox in all of their houses. Sometimes it is. The Democratic Party and the Democratic leadership in the United States is not people that you would want in charge of things. But that is not as severe, and the damage isn't as much as what the Republican leadership is.
It has turned into a political spectacle from the White House's perspective and from Gavin Newsom's perspective. I think this is like a classic. It's good politics on both sides for what both are doing, and hoping that it appeals to their base and it extends further than that. And they're both wrong.
But it is extra wrong if your good politics thing that you're doing involves sending U.S. troops into U.S. cities. Like, that is not the same as, it's good politics for Gavin Newsom to pick a fight. And I'm not sure I'd want him to be governor of the state I live in. But that's different. That is wildly different than sending the troops in. And the thing that I think that I was going to suggest for a story that we didn't talk about is Donald Trump backtracking on immigrant and farm labor. And it turns out, actually, in the end, we're going to let them stay. Like, I don't know where the U.S. government stands on kind of any issues. It seems odd to me that where they're holding the firmest is on these like really dangerous, I think, political fights that they're picking internally. And I really do hope that cooler heads prevail eventually in the United States. But this kind of yo-yo all over the place kind of...
Well, they're not telling them they can stay. Dangerous. They're still telling them they can self-identify and they can leave and then reapply to re-enter, which I think is crazy.
But is it that Wall Street refers to the president as Taco Trump? It seems like it turns out the president
but this one's different.
Chickened out on farm.
No. I see this one as entirely different than that. So what I see here is they got what they wanted. They got the spectacle. They knew that these raids would cause the backstir that they do, and farm country gets happy because, hey, the president backed off. I see this is entirely on purpose. It was unnecessary because we've been talking about this for over a year. The reliance of the agricultural industry on illegal farm workers and processing workers as well. North of 50% of the dairy industry employs, or over 50% of the dairy people that work on dairies in the U.S. are illegal immigrants. In some states, it's as high as 90% of the farm workers. There's no shock. There's no surprise here. Like, if you're shocked, late to the party. This did not have to happen this week. It is, like I said earlier, it's one of the reasons why the cattle market is stirred up because of but also what Wiesmeyer said on Wednesday's show was that some of these companies that are getting raided have been using the E-Verify system, which is another, like, what is going on here? That's not good either.
Shaun, I've had a hard time with kind of Kelvin going from a Carney cheerleader to a Carney critic, making sense of that. Your swing to full on Trump cheerleader.
Oh, here we go. Cheerleading. I just said it was dumb.
Here we go.
You just like to put stickers on people all the time.
Has he actually backed down on it, though? Like, he posted something on social media yesterday.
I don't think so.
But the actual policies haven't changed, and unless this is all just going to be like off the record directives to ICE agents to not go after farm operations and food operations, the actual policies and directions from Kristi Noem.
It depends in the given week how much influence Stephen Miller has.
Okay, but can we also just stop for a minute and then exactly recognize how crazy that is?
Yeah.
Is this really what you want, America? Is to have a system where nobody knows
helicopters over farm workers' field in California?
Everybody, like,
the polls
so
show
you've got an issue?
The polls show that America, okay, so I think here's there's a difference, okay? There's a difference between the issue around illegal immigrants, and then there's the safety component. So polls are showing if they stick to, we are kicking people out of this country that have criminal records, that are a danger to society, the American public is very much on side with that. Mm-hmm. And that's why one of the policy points that Trump is the strongest with still with Americans is not the economy. It is immigration policy in that zone. The problem is what's been happening the last couple of weeks is that because Stephen Miller all of a sudden has, I don't know, Trump's distracted and doing something else, but Stephen Miller has a lot more power, and it's expanded to just regular illegal Americans. I say regular illegal Americans.
Yeah, this isn't a surprise though. Everybody who pointed this all out, exactly. But this was a known down the road of where this was headed, that a whole bunch of people stood up and said, this is the slippery slope that we head down, that you
I think they're going
target
back to it.
this one. But this is what I mean. Well, okay, then do it. But like, that is not what this is. That is not what happened this week and last weekend. It is not a whole bunch of people with records that somehow slipped in and are running cartels in the States. These are people that are hanging out at Home Depot to go cut the lawns of Americans.
Yeah.
Those are very different things. And this was called out how long ago? It was pointed out that this is exactly how it was going to go. And that's what you want?
I'm going to tell you that this sort of like when we talk about the difference in attitudes towards and the culture around guns between Canada and the U.S., Canadians, I don't think, understand how important the border policy is in America on both sides of the aisle.
No, but I think, Shaun, people also don't understand the damage that the rhetoric does and the misinformation that plays out there, right? You look at the big numbers that they talk about of people that they're going to deport. You only get to those, like, there's not enough criminals.
They're never good.
Exactly.
There's not enough criminals. You only get to those numbers if you're deporting. Again, the people that are in farmers' fields or in dairy barns or cutting grass. And
can we step back and be like, because we deal with this in Canada as well, is the question of, okay, so what conditions are to the point, like what led to the fact that the agriculture industry employs so many? Like, what are all the factors? And I'm not trying to simplify it because it's not simple, but we deal with this in Canada as well. Why are we to a point, or why is America to a point where such a huge percentage of labor on farms are undocumented migrants? Why? Like, what are all the factors that led there? Because that's what needs addressed.
We have an undocumented worker problem in Canada?
Well, there's definitely pressure on the TFW program. They're not
exactly. I'm not saying undocumented.
You just said undocumented.
No, I said for the U.S. And I said we have similar issues in Canada so let me separate
Canadians
the two.
Don't want to do the work.
Exactly. Where we have a lot of migrant workers working in Canada. I'm not saying undocumented, but in Canada, you just said the stat of how many undocumented workers are within agriculture. So how did agriculture get there? That's my point. So because for the U.S. and Canada,
part of the problem is in the U.S. the H-2A program is only 6 months.
Exactly.
A dairy farm needs somebody 12 months of the year.
That's right. So what I'm saying is there's an there are failed policies, but what's happening is we're not fixing the policies. We're targeting people that don't look like us.
It's not good politics to raise food prices.
Well, okay,
and that's ultimately the issue.
No, it's not.
People want cheap.
No, part of the problem is because of the price. Come on, guys. There was 12,000 people a day entering the country illegally. But this is more than just like, hey, we're like
exactly. It is, and so how are ICE raids the solution to this problem? They're not. I hate to break it to everybody. You can't go in there and pretend that ICE raids are going to solve your migrant problem. And it is way worse than that. And you can't convince me otherwise. It is far more complicated.
If they focused on people with criminal records, they're going to have support from the American
public. But I'm telling you right now, that's an excuse.
Oh, I got to edit that out. Come on, Lyndsey.
Okay, then take it out. But I am so...
No, and I got to edit that out again. Like, you're just creating a bunch of work for me this afternoon.
Oh, I'll just keep going.
Yeah. The cooler heads need to prevail, and
which is not me. So
not you. Me.
We've established that.
Turns out this is why we don't talk about this during the main show, because
that is exactly
gets
correct.
And again, I think rightfully so, right? Like, I think that this is something that we should get wound up about, and I think it's a bit.
Yes.
I think it's easy always when it's like, again, you see like the cops segment on the news of ICE people rounding up people in downtown Chicago that are in some gang or something, but like that's there's a lot of other things that are going on that people, I think, are trying to turn a blind eye to. That it's dangerous. Like it's, I think we are very firm. Like this is not the slippery slope is no longer a theoretical possibility.
That's right.
They're on it, and when all of a sudden you're worried about one of the reasons you're worried about beef prices going down is because packing plants can't run because the ice has rounded up the people that work in them. Like, I don't think that that's what Americans voted for, but I think that that's the crazy leadership that exists today. That's what it's giving them. And
less Stephen Miller. That's less Stephen Miller.
More
with
people.
Elon?
What's that?
Some people, when Elon left, said Stephen Miller will fill that vacuum. Is that tied?
Well, Stephen Miller is like...
But I think it's not just...
Although Stephen Miller's wife does work for Elon, so there's that.
I don't think it's just Stephen Miller, right? To be honest, I think it's everybody else in the kind of the ecosystem that says, yeah, but this is different, and this is what the public wants, so we can justify this and all of these things. And I think that at a certain point in time, right, the common sense Republican has got to stand up and say, like, look, this is absurd.
What you allow will continue. And
we'll
apply that however you want. To policy, to leadership, what you allow will continue. That's it. And that is my biggest fear in all of this, is that the longer it is allowed, whatever facet of this, to slide into absolute chaos and mayhem, that is what continues, and it just gets worse. It doesn't get better.
Yeah.
Well, there's nowhere to go but down from here, so...
Yeah. I'm going outside to touch grass, everybody.
I mean, but I think
Iran would be the most controversial thing we talked about today.
I think
bonus segment. Anything can happen.
That there is this moment. I think this is all good, like, reminders that we need to not fall into this trap in the Canadian context, and we need to do everything we can to still have, like, a reasonable discussions about kind of what are the options in front of us, and understand that. Actually, I think one of the things it's an important thing not to fall into in the Canadian context is Canada isn't the United States. The situations that exist in Canada aren't like they are in the United States. As much as there's probably too many people living in Brampton, there are parts of this country that still need immigration because there's not enough Canadians there.
Yeah,
like we're in a different context,
we don't have the volume of illegal people coming into the country.
Yeah,
we don't.
But we also don't have houses for the people that we have invited in.
But that's a much smaller issue. Like, the scale of the problem is different in the Canadian context.
But we still have issues that we need to address as well.
Yeah, but go back to, so somebody was telling me this week, if you look at Nova Scotia, the population in Nova Scotia, it's gone up, but what's happened is the population in Halifax is going up, and the population in the rest of the province is actually going down, right? And you've got this that plays out across the country. So we don't have necessarily enough houses in Brampton, but there are lots of houses in other parts of these provinces that if we could build immigration systems that got people where they needed to go, we'd be better off at the end of the day. And there are options like that don't involve raids on immigrants and don't involve turning the caps down to zero. We've got to be smarter about these things, but that doesn't mean we need to be crazy about them. Yeah. There seems to be a shortage of good options and a shortage of good leadership in this country. Or in their country, not in our country.
Which country?
Our country's better off.
Yeah.
I think Canada's pretty fortunate.
Okay. Well,
again, the Prime Minister might not be good enough for Kelvin, but I think he's doing a lot of good things.
I gotta run to a meeting. Okay, everybody, hey, send your feedback. Haney at RealAgriculture.com. We'll talk to you again. We'll talk to you again next week.